Dear brothers and sisters, good day. Today, I speak to you with a heart that carries the joys and sorrows of humanity. We live in a world full of beauty, yes, but also in a world wounded by inequality, indifference, and the abandonment of those who are most in need. The poor and vulnerable are not a problem to be solved. They are our brothers and sisters. Their pain is a reflection of our shared responsibility. Their tears are our tears. Let us reflect on how we are called, each one of us, to care for them, to love them, and to lift them up. Before we begin, I kindly invite you to support this mission of compassion and reflection. If these words inspire you, please like the video, subscribe to the channel, click the bell icon to stay connected, and share this message with others. May it touch many hearts. Dear brothers and sisters, good day. Today, I wish to speak to you not only with words, but with a heart moved by the suffering and dignity of the poor and vulnerable. We cannot remain indifferent. The world we live in, so full of riches, of advancement, of promises, still allows countless people to live without shelter, without food, without love. How can this be? How can we call ourselves a family of humanity when so many are excluded from the table? We must remember, the poor are not a problem to be solved. They are people to be embraced. They carry the wisdom of suffering, the strength of endurance, and the image of the divine. Their wounds are holy ground. When we care for them, we do not perform charity. We do justice. We give not from abundance, but from love. We restore not only dignity to others, but humanity to ourselves. It is a mistake to think the poor only need bread. They also need friendship, tenderness, respect. And yes, they need voices that will not speak about them, but with them. Too often, society builds walls of silence and forgetfulness around those on the margins. But love builds bridges, love listens, love bends low to lift others up. There is no true peace in the heart of a person who walks past the suffering of others and says, "This is not my concern." No peace in the home that draws its curtains against the cold of the street. No peace in a society where success is measured by what we keep and not by what we give. The poor are not the responsibility of a few. They are the responsibility of all. To ignore them is to turn away from Christ Himself. Let us remember that the Lord did not come as a king clothed in gold, but as a child wrapped in swaddling clothes. He did not dine with the powerful, but with the outcast. He did not call the comfortable, but those in need. And still today, He calls us not to live in fear of losing what we have, but to live in the joy of giving what we can. When we reach out to the poor, we do not just change their lives, we change our own. We discover that generosity does not diminish us, it multiplies grace. That kindness does not weaken us, it strengthens our soul. That every act of mercy is a step closer to the heart of God. Do not wait for institutions. Do not wait for others. Begin with what is in your hand: a kind word, a shared meal, a simple gesture. And if you feel small, remember, it is often the smallest light that shines brightest in the dark. We must build a culture of encounter where no one feels invisible. A world where the elderly are cherished, not discarded. Where the migrant is welcomed, not feared. Where the hungry are fed not just with food, but with dignity. This is not a dream. It is a commandment of love. It is the gospel lived. So I ask you from my heart, do not be afraid to love the poor. Do not be afraid to touch their wounds. Do not be afraid to give something of yourself. For when you do, you will find that you are not losing your life, you are finding it. And so, let us go forth, not with pity, but with compassion, not with guilt, but with hope. Let our hands be open, our hearts be wide, and our lives be living signs of mercy. May we be people who do not walk past suffering, but who stop, kneel, and lift others up with joy. And may our care for the poor be the song we sing with our lives, a song that echoes in heaven. Too often, society teaches us to see the poor as a problem, an inconvenience, a burden to be managed or avoided. They are spoken of in numbers, debated in politics, and analyzed in economics. But in all this noise, we forget the most important truth. They are not a burden, they are a gift. A sacred gift placed in our lives not to trouble us, but to transform us. When we look into the eyes of someone who has nothing, we are not looking into emptiness. We are looking into a heart that has known pain and perseverance, rejection and resilience. These are not lives to be dismissed. They are lives that carry a deep and often hidden beauty. They remind us of what truly matters, not possessions or prestige, but humility, kindness, and shared humanity. The poor teach us how to hope with empty hands. They show us how to be grateful for even the smallest gesture of care. In their presence, we are invited to strip away our illusions of control and self-sufficiency. We are reminded that we too are vulnerable, that we too depend on grace, on one another, on love. If we truly listen, their lives speak louder than any sermon, not with words, but with the silent eloquence of suffering endured and dignity maintained in the midst of great need. There is a strength in the poor that the world often overlooks, a strength that does not come from power, but from patience, from bearing life's weight with courage that refuses to break. The poor are a gift because they awaken in us what is most human. They remind us that no person is self-made, that we rise not by climbing over others, but by lifting them. They challenge our priorities and shake the foundations of our comfort. And yes, they bless us, not in the way the world counts blessings, but in the way God does, through the opportunity to love without expecting anything in return. In the gospel, the Lord does not separate himself from the poor. He identifies with them. He says, "Whatever you did for the least of these, you did for me." He is there in the hungry child, in the weary mother, in the forgotten elder. If we wish to find him, we need not look far. We need only to draw near to the suffering and to open our hearts. Let us no longer see poverty as a misfortune that makes others less than us. Let us see it as a sacred invitation to encounter, an invitation that, if we accept it with humility, can lead us to a deeper love, a more joyful simplicity, and a faith that is not just spoken, but lived. The poor bless us, they sanctify us, they draw us out of ourselves and bring us closer to what is eternal. And so we must welcome them, not reluctantly, not from obligation, but with open arms and open hearts. For in doing so, we do not diminish ourselves, we discover who we truly are. We are not called to walk through this world with blinders on, thinking only of ourselves and our own lives. The gospel calls us to more. It calls us to walk with others, especially those who suffer. This walking together, this act of standing side by side, is what we call solidarity. And solidarity is not an idea, it is a way of living. It is the language of the gospel in action. Solidarity means recognizing that we belong to one another, that no one is saved alone, that the pain of the other is my pain, and the joy of the other is my joy. It is not enough to feel sorry from a distance. It is not enough to send aid without a heart. True solidarity moves us to enter into the reality of others, to carry a portion of their burden, and to allow their suffering to touch our lives, shape our priorities, and change our choices. We must not confuse solidarity with charity that flows only from abundance. Solidarity is deeper than occasional generosity. It is a commitment, a decision to see every person as brother, every sister as part of my own story. It is to say, I will not turn away. I will not pretend that this does not concern me. I will not hide behind excuses or comfort or fear. This is not ideology. It is the gospel. It is what Jesus showed us again and again. He stood with the sick, not the strong. He walked with the poor, not the privileged. He touched the untouchable. He dined with the outcast. He did not come to observe suffering from afar. He entered into it, embraced it, and carried it with those who were most in need. When we live in solidarity, we build a different kind of world, a world where no one is seen as less than, where differences do not divide but enrich, a world where we learn to listen before we judge, to accompany before we advise, to understand before we speak. Solidarity teaches us to slow down and truly see one another, not as problems, not as projects, but as people. And this way of living is urgent. In a world torn apart by division, by inequality, by a growing gap between those who have too much and those who have too little, solidarity is not just a virtue, it is a necessity. It is the healing balm our world needs. It is the answer to indifference, to greed, to isolation. It is the bridge between hearts that have been closed and the truth that we are one family. Solidarity begins with the small things, choosing to listen to someone in pain, defending those without a voice, sharing what we have even when it costs us. And from those small acts, a great wave of transformation begins. The gospel comes alive in every gesture of solidarity. It becomes visible in how we treat the stranger, the outcast, the one we might otherwise ignore. And so we must ask ourselves, are we people of solidarity or people of convenience? Do we see the other as a neighbor or as a burden? Do we walk with those who suffer, or do we pass them by? These are questions not only for our personal lives, but for our communities, our institutions, even our nation. Let us choose the path of solidarity. Let us speak its language with our hands, our feet, our hearts. Because in the end, it is not enough to preach the gospel, we must live it. And to live, it is to stand with the poor, to walk with the wounded, and to love not in words alone, but in presence, in action, in truth. There is a form of poverty that is less visible, but perhaps more dangerous than all others. It does not live on the streets or cry out for bread. It dwells quietly in the heart that no longer feels, no longer sees, no longer responds. It is the poverty of indifference, and it is the greatest poverty of all. To be indifferent is not simply to do nothing. It is to decide that someone else's pain is not worth your attention. It is to walk past a suffering brother or sister as though they were invisible. It is to hear the cry of the hungry, the oppressed, the displaced, and continue on as if nothing was heard. Indifference hardens the heart. It makes compassion feel like an inconvenience. It puts up walls where bridges should be. When we lose the capacity to be moved by suffering, we begin to lose our humanity. We turn inward. We become obsessed with our own concerns, our own comfort, our own world. But the human heart was not made for isolation. It was made for communion, for empathy, for love. Indifference is a kind of blindness, not of the eyes, but of the soul. It keeps us from seeing Christ in the face of the stranger. It convinces us that the poor are someone else's responsibility. It says, "It's not my problem." When a child sleeps in the cold, it says, "I'm too busy." When an elderly neighbor longs for a visit, it says, "I've done enough," while others continue to go without. This is the poverty we must be most vigilant against, because it does not shout, it whispers. It disguises itself as normal life, as routine, as neutrality. But the gospel never calls us to be neutral. It calls us to take sides with the weak, the vulnerable, the voiceless. It calls us to act, and we must act not only for others, but for ourselves, because indifference corrodes the soul. It eats away at joy. It leaves us empty even when we are surrounded by abundance. A life lived in indifference is not a free life. It is a closed one, a small one, and it risks missing the very meaning of existence, which is to love and to be loved. We cannot say we follow the teachings of love if we turn away from the wounds of the world. We cannot speak of faith if we fail to recognize the sacred dignity of those who suffer. Our beliefs must lead us to action. Our prayers must lead us to presence. Our words must become flesh, just as the Word became flesh and dwelt among us, not in palaces, but among the poor. It is not always comfortable to care. It costs us time, energy, sometimes even our security. But to love is always worth the cost, because when we open our hearts, we allow something greater to enter. We discover that to feel deeply is not a weakness, it is a strength. That to be wounded by compassion is to be touched by grace. Let us not become numb. Let us not accept a world where suffering is ignored, where injustice is tolerated, where lives are reduced to numbers. Let us not grow accustomed to the cry of the poor or the silence of the forgotten. Instead, let us allow these things to disturb us, to move us, to change us. The greatest poverty is not having nothing, it is caring for nothing. And the richest soul is not the one with many possessions, but the one that refuses to ignore the pain of others. Let us ask for the grace to see, to feel, to act. Let us pray not for comfort, but for compassion. And let us live in such a way that no one around us ever feels forgotten, unseen, or unloved. In a world so often divided, by race, by class, by ideology, by distance, we are called to something greater, something more human, something deeply Christian, to build a culture of encounter. This is not simply a polite exchange of words or a superficial connection. No, an encounter in its truest form is something sacred. It is a meeting of hearts. It is a moment when we look beyond labels, beyond appearances, beyond assumptions, and see the other as they truly are. A child of God, a fellow traveler, someone worthy of dignity and love. We do not build a culture of encounter with grand speeches or perfect systems. We build it one person at a time. When we listen with genuine interest, when we stop to ask someone's name, when we open our homes, when we cross boundaries to meet those who are different. These are the bricks of this culture. It begins in the small, in the personal, in the everyday. But this kind of encounter requires courage. It demands that we come out of ourselves, that we leave behind the safety of the familiar and enter the sacred space of another person's life. It asks us to risk vulnerability, to be open to discomfort, to be willing to be changed. Because true encounter changes us. It transforms fear into understanding, strangers into friends, enemies into brothers. In the face of so much isolation, so much loneliness, and so many walls, both visible and invisible, we are invited to be bridge builders, not just to tolerate one another, but to meet one another, to look into the eyes of the homeless man and see not a threat, but a story, to hear the refugee not as a burden, but as a bearer of hope, to speak to those who disagree with us not with hostility, but with a heart that says, I am willing to listen. A culture of encounter does not erase difference. It honors it. It does not require uniformity. It celebrates unity in diversity. It creates space where all feel seen and heard, where wounds can be healed through empathy, and where reconciliation becomes possible. This is how peace grows. This is how communion is built, not through power, but through presence. And this must begin with us, with our families, our communities, our neighborhoods. When we see someone who is alone, do we greet them? When we meet someone with a different background, do we welcome them or withdraw? When we disagree with someone, do we seek to understand or only to win? These are the moments where the culture of encounter is born or denied. The gospel calls us to this way of life. Jesus did not remain distant. He met people where they were, at their tables, in their suffering, on the streets. He did not judge from afar. He came close. He touched the leper. He wept with the grieving. He ate with sinners. He spoke to the outsider. He lived a life of encounter. So must we. Let us not hide behind our screens, our comfort, our fear. Let us step into the lives of others with reverence and humility. Let us make room for stories that are not our own. Let us be the ones who break down walls, who cross borders of indifference, who make our lives a home where others feel welcomed and known. This is the revolution of tenderness the world so desperately needs. This is the witness the gospel asks of us, not just in word, but in how we live, how we meet, how we love. Let us not forget who we are called to be. We are not called to be a church of prestige, of power, of perfect appearances. We are called to be a church of the poor, a church that walks with the poor, listens to them, learns from them, loves them, not from above, but from beside them. This is not an option. It is the very heart of the gospel. It is the mission of Christ, lived through his people. To be the church of the poor is to place those on the margins at the center. Not in theory, not as a slogan, but in our choices, our priorities, our actions. It means that we do not merely serve the poor as outsiders looking in, but we become poor with them, in spirit, in simplicity, in solidarity. We do not just offer charity, we offer community. We do not just give, we share. And in sharing, we discover something profound, that the church is never richer than when she stands close to the poor. This kind of church does not seek comfort. She seeks the cross. She does not chase applause. She bends low to wash feet. She is not obsessed with structures or status, but with compassion and closeness. She listens before she speaks. She heals before she judges. She gives without counting the cost. Let us not be content with beautiful churches and empty hearts. Let our altars never be far from the streets. Let our hymns be matched by the cry of justice. Let our prayers rise with the voices of those who have been silenced by poverty and pain. If our faith does not lead us to the wounded, to the excluded, to the hungry and homeless, then it is not the faith of Christ. The church of the poor is a church that welcomes all, especially those who have been told they do not belong. It opens wide her doors not just to the righteous, but to the struggling, the addicted, the broken-hearted, the forgotten. It does not ask for credentials. It asks only for an open heart, because it is in the poor, in the humble, in the least, that we most clearly encounter Christ Himself. This is not about politics. It is about the gospel. It is not about ideology. It is about love. Love that refuses to remain in comfort while others suffer. Love that walks into the shadows to find those the world has left behind. Love that builds a church not of stone, but of mercy. And when we become that kind of church, when we let go of privilege and embrace service, something changes, not just in the world, but in us. We become freer, lighter, more joyful. We remember that the church does not exist for herself. She exists to be a light in the darkness, a refuge for the weary, a voice for the voiceless, a sign of God's kingdom breaking into the world, not with force, but with tenderness. So let us rise. Let us be a church that smells like the sheep. Let us be a church that walks dusty roads, that breaks bread with the poor, that is not afraid to get her hands dirty in the work of love. Let us not fear losing power. Let us fear losing our soul, for we are never more faithful, never more beautiful, never more alive than when we are with the poor, for the poor as the poor in spirit. Let this be our mission. Let this be our witness. Let this be our joy. Dear friends, the cry of the poor is the voice of God calling to each one of us. Let us not be deaf to it. Let us respond not just with words, but with our lives. And let us remember, the greatest gift we can give is not gold or silver, but love, dignity, and the assurance that no one is forgotten. May we go forth to serve, to heal, and to love. May God bless you, and may He bless the poor, in whose face we see His own. Thank you, and may peace be with you.